Let me bring in William Jacobson, Cornell law professor and the mind behind legalinsurrection.com. This is from your site today. Special counsel John Durham's final report showed everyone what we already knew. There was no collusion between Trump and Russia in 2016 or ever. You read this report throughout the night, burning the midnight oil, William. What did it tell you?
Well, there are a couple of very big takeaways, and one of the biggest takeaways is what a destructive, vicious, damaging person Hillary Clinton is to our political process. This Russia collusion thing didn't only damage Trump. He won the 2016 election anyway, despite this. Think how big a victory he might have had without it. But it really froze and paralyzed the country politically for over 4 years. The damage Hillary Clinton's campaign did was so tremendous to this nation. And I think that to some extent, while it's being highlighted by a lot of the news coverage, they're not really doing it personal to Hillary, and it needs to be. She really is possibly the most destructive politician we've certainly had in this century, in recent memory. The manipulation that she perpetrated here is so horrible.
Look at what these last 4 years have done to the nation, have done to us. This was perpetrated upon us. Trump will take it, of course, personally, and he's not wrong to do so, but it would be out of control. It would be an obscene thought almost to think that we aren't the victims of this. But as you're discussing, I'd like for you to break it down, and you do so over at legalinsurrection.com, your site. This entire conversation about Trump and the Russians comes from a Hillary Clinton and Clinton campaign fever dream that, hey, how can we put this together? Based on the report, how did they put that together?
Yeah, I mean, it was done through, it was made up. I mean, it was fabricated. It was not even based on any real sourcing in the so-called Steele dossier. And it was completely concocted by Hillary Clinton paid operatives. That's how it happened. So, that's my first takeaway. The second takeaway is what you've pointed out. The FBI and the federal government played a supportive role in this. Remember that the FBI, according to the Durham Report, knew that this was a hoax, knew that there was no evidence to support it, but allowed it to percolate. And then they briefed the senior Obama administration officials about this. The report seems to indicate, including Obama, although it's a little unclear from the report, at least that I remember, whether it was face-to-face with him or through others to him. But clearly he was aware of it, and so was his whole administration. And they allowed this to happen, and they said nothing.
And the question is, at what point do we have a de facto state media? It has all of the elements, all the practices that you see with the state media. The only difference is that this is by consent rather than coercion. And
I thought that was a rather solid take. But what I didn't know is if there is on the legal side something that can be done regarding how media worked this story. And is there something that could be done regarding how the federal government, how the FBI, the DOJ, the Obama White House, others worked this story? Is this just another one of those things of, yeah, that happened, it's horrible, oh, well, what can you do?
Well, I'm not sure there's anything that legally can be done. And I think that Jonathan Turley points out what to me is takeaway number 3 is the media. The media so hated Trump that they interfered in our election. They manipulated our political process, and they did it as a group with only a handful of exceptions. And those handful of exceptions were demonized and ostracized and deplatformed. So you have Hillary Clinton, you have the federal government, and you have the mainstream corporate media completely manipulating our process. And I think you put those three things together, and that's the most depressing side, which is that what Russia collusion hoax has exposed is a deep corruption in our political process, one that really, I think, shattered a lot of people's faith in the political process. And that really, I think, is why you have the toxic politics that we have now. Now, of course, the corporate media tries to portray it as it's always, conservatives react to, or conservatives jump on, or no.
Seize that whole thing.
Yes, seize was the word I was looking for. Thank you. The conservatives seize. But no, I mean, there are not enough bad words that can be said about our mainstream corporate media. They are corrupt to the core. They are manipulative to the core. They are dishonest to the core. Occasionally, as Rush used to say, they do random acts of real journalism. So even the New York Times is capable of excellent journalism, but they're also capable and very experienced and expert at manipulating the political process. When the Durham Report came out, the first thing I read, only because I Googled it, and of course, New York Times comes to the top, is I clicked on the New York Times story, and they're still manipulating the process. After reading that story, it's, oh, no big deal, no biggie. Some things happened, didn't really affect anything. Let's move on. That was the New York Times story. Now, credit to ABC News and some others. They actually wrote up what happened here and did a good job at it. But the New York Times is still manipulating the political process. And all we want to hear about is Russian interference in the election because they bought $100,000 worth of ads in Facebook in 2016. Remember how much we heard about that? And then all of a sudden, we find out that there was a collusion across the Democratic political spectrum, which dwarfed anything Russia did 1,000 or 1,000,000 times over. And that's just being swept under the rug. So I think the damage that's been done is long lasting. It tears at the fabric of our society. And it was caused by Hillary Clinton, the federal government, and the mainstream corporate media, all acting in unison.